Welcome back to another episode of Flash Professional CS5 for East Tech. In this episode, we are going to be talking about animation, specifically frame-by-frame animation, keyframes, regular frames, and blank keyframes. So we're going to go ahead and get started. There's some shortcuts that we want to make sure that are going to work properly. So before we begin, you will want to go to your System Preferences, click the little apple in the upper left corner, click on System Preferences, click on Keyboard and Mouse, and make sure under Keyboard that Use All F1, F2, etc. keys is checked. This is actually going to assure that function keys will work for other programs, and any function key that normally worked with the Apple iMac will now have to have the Fn key pressed at the same time as the function key, as it says right here, for it to work. So let's go ahead and close this. Let's take a look at what we have going here. The number one thing you want to make sure of is that you do have sufficient layers as you are creating your piece. So if you notice down here in the lower left corner, I do have things broken down. The sky is the furthest thing away from us, so therefore it's in the very bottom layer of the timeline. Next we have the sun, the clouds. That means we're going to be able to actually have the clouds move across in front of the sun if we choose to. The mountains are then next. Our buildings come next. We then have a set of trees that fall right along in front of the buildings. Then we have our boy and then another set of trees, so as the boy walks across the stage, he'll be able to pass between trees. And of course we've also added a mask so we can close everything off to the actual stage as we're viewing it. The fact that we do have a mask, however, means that we do have locked layers. So when we go to work with a layer, we're going to want to make sure that we unlock that layer first. We will be working with the boy, so we'll unlock him. And we will want to hide the mask. So I'll go ahead and click on the dot under the eye to hide the mask. So now what we're looking at is pretty much everything unmasked. As you notice, we do have a lot of extra stuff out here on the right that I've created. And that's so if we do decide to have like a scrolling background and keep our boy mainly stationary walking, we have plenty of background to scroll on by. First thing we need to do is animate the boy. We want him to actually go through the motions of a full stride of walking. We're going to hold the space command and then zoom in on him. And when I double click on the boy, what basically happens, if you look down here in the timeline, everything else has gone away. And there's one layer. If you look up at the top corner, the reason why, we have scene one and we've now gone deeper into the layer where we just have the boy. This is going to allow us to create a nested animation of just the boy walking. So if you notice, there are a number of different squares making up the boy. If for some reason we happen to have clicked out of it and clicked back on, only selected one area, we can actually correct that by doing a command A for select all. We right click and come down to distribute to layers. Just like before, we want to break this down to a variety of different layers so we can actually have the arms and legs move independent of the body. Next thing we want to do is go through and select the different layers to find out what they are. To make them more visible, I'm going to go ahead and turn on my free transform. I can always click on free transform or hit Q. I'll go ahead and hit Q. So now it's going to be real obvious what we're looking at. So layer 3 is the head. And right now what we want to do is we want to go through and label every part of the body. So this is the right arm. You're going to notice layer 1 in this particular exercise, there's nothing checked. This is a background for just the boy, which is virtually a useless background. So I can actually right click and delete that layer. We don't need that. And now if I go to layer 4, we have the body. Layer 5 is the left arm. Layer 6 is the right leg, and layer 7 is the left leg. Now there is one thing that's apparently not quite correct here. Remember, the lowest possible layer is the piece of the scenery, or in this case the body, that is the furthest away from us. And the one at the top is the layer that is closest to us. If we notice, the very top, the right arm is closest to us. That would be correct. Then the head, and that is a good idea, having the head above the body, because the head will actually help cover up part of the neck that we don't want to see. If you were actually to stand up and analyze your own body, the next thing would be the right leg, then the left leg, then the left arm. Otherwise, when that left arm swings below and behind the body, it's actually going to appear in front of these legs. We don't want that. So let's go ahead and grab the left arm and drag the left arm all the way down to the bottom. All right, so now we have our body parts separated. We need to talk about different types of frames. There are 3 different types of frames we're going to be dealing with. We have keyframes, which in frame number 1, these are all keyframes. They're designated by this rectangle with a black dot in the middle of it. We can use keyframes when we use animation of the arms, and what's going to happen with that is that we are going to actually be able to have the arm move by adjusting the arm each time for each frame, just slightly, to give the illusion of movement. However, there is something known as a regular frame, which basically will allow us to duplicate all of the frames the same. This is going to be a 10-frame animation. In fact, before we actually start animating, we should set our frame count. If I go to Properties, click outside of this for a second, I want to change my frames per second to 15. That's going to give us a limited animation, but it should be sufficient for what we're doing. And now the head and the body right now are not going to be moving. So I'm going to click on frame number 10 for the body. And the shortcut for a regular frame is F5. So I could go up to Insert, Timeline, Frame, which is F5. But it's going to be a lot easier just go ahead and click on F5. Notice keyframe and blank frame do not have shortcuts. Well, they actually do, but for some reason Flash did not include them. Keyframe is an F6, blank frame is an F7. These are 3 that you're going to really want to memorize because we're going to be using them a lot. So let's go back down here. We click on our frame number 10, hit F5, and we now have our body going all the way through. Our body is now in that layer. If I click on frame 10 of the head, hit F5, we now have our head and body. So we are now ready to start animating our arms and legs. At the very bottom of the frame, we have something called onion skin. We want to click that on. What an onion skin is it will allow us to see the previous frame as a transparency so we know how to lay down the part of the body that we want to work with on top of that. So we're going to start with the right arm. If I click on the right arm, it's now highlighted. This is the right arm as far as frame 1 is concerned. This little white dot is a rotation point. We want to move this up to the shoulder. This is going to allow us to rotate that arm at that pivot point. So the right arm is there. We go ahead and click on frame 2. Notice that it is now transparent. I hit F6 to actually create a keyframe, and what this also does is it will duplicate the previous frame animation directly on top of this frame. So it basically duplicated frame 1 in frame 2. I can now go ahead and move my cursor down to the bottom corner where I have that little curved arrow. That means I can click and rotate. So as I click and drag over, I can see frame 1 underneath in transparency, and I can go ahead now and draw frame 2 right on top of that. I'll go ahead and click on frame 3, hit F6 again, and I just repeat. I'm going to do this all the way up to frame number 6. And I'll explain why in just a second. Now we're on frame 4, click and drag. Frame 5, F6 and drag. And finally, frame 6, F6 and drag. And now we've gone through one full rotation of the arm swing. Starting at frame 7, our arm's going to start swinging back. We don't have to click and drag. All we need to do is copy the previous arm swing to replace each frame. When we move on to frame 7, what we're actually going to be doing is copying frame 5 into the spot of frame 7. So first let's go to frame 5. We're going to do a Command C to copy. We click on frame 7, and now we're going to hit a F7, which basically gives us a blank keyframe. And now that we have a blank keyframe, we can drop something in there, which will be paste and place frame 5. So to paste and place, Command Shift V has now pasted frame 5 into frame 7. We go to frame 4, do a Command C, click on 8, hit F7 to get a blank keyframe, and then Command Shift V to paste. And once again, frame 3, Command C, frame 9, F7, Command Shift V to paste. And finally, we go to frame 2, Command C to copy. We go to frame 10, and we hit an F7 for the blank keyframe, and one more time, paste in place. So we only stop at 2. That's because when the rotation goes back to repeat, it will repeat at frame 1, which we only need to show once. So if I hit the return key, it will give me a sample of that animation. So there's my animation. I now just repeat that with all of the other body parts. So I'll probably speed through this so we don't have to sit and watch me create every single body part, but I'll just go through the left arm really quick. Now, if you feel that that other arm is going to be a distraction, we can always shut that off by clicking on the eye. But I think we're going to be okay with this, so let's go ahead and do a quick animation of the left arm. First thing I want to do is I want to set my rotation. The pivot point, we're going to push that up here to the corner of the arm. And now I go to the next frame. Remember, it's F6 first, and then rotate. 3, copy, and paste in place. Finally, 2, copy, F7, paste in place. Okay, so now our arms are done. Let's take a look at the arms. Down to the legs. The legs are a little tricky just getting the pivot points in the right place. On this leg, what I found to be one of the better place to place it, probably right about here on the hip. And on the back leg, the left leg, we're going to want to place it kind of right on the back here. So they're not quite right next to each other. And you know what? We may go ahead and start our stride just a little bit further stride to start with. And now we're going to go ahead and start moving our leg. So let's go ahead and start redoing that leg. So once again, F6, rotate, F6 and rotate. And the last one. Okay, so now we have our boy animated. Let's go ahead and take a look at how he looks here as we run the whole animation. Now, the other thing we might want to do is we might want to do a little bit of a head bob. So let's go ahead and pick our second frame. We'll shift click the last frame, and we'll go ahead and delete these frames. If I right click, I can remove all those frames. And we're going to basically have his head kind of bobbing up and down as he walks. So there's his first move. We go ahead and come out here to do an F6, and I'm just going to use my arrow keys. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 for good measure. One more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And let's bring it back up. F6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. F6, 1, 2, 3. And then F6, 1, 2, 3. Now we bring it back down one more time. F6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. F6, 1, 2, 3, 4. Bring it back up. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And in fact, maybe go to 4. There we go. Let's take a look at what that looks like. Okay, so we've got our animation. Now, once we've created the nested animation for the boy, we can now go back out to our main scene. Let's go ahead up here to click on the back arrow. We're back in scene 1 now. And let's go ahead and open it up so we see the whole frame. Right now for this animation, all I really want to do is have the boy walk in from the side and walk all the way across the scene. We're going to do that in 90 frames. So there are certain items that we can freeze in this case. We're going to freeze the sky, the sun. I want the clouds to move, but the buildings and the trees will all keep in place. So let's come out here to measure 90, and I'll click on the sky and go ahead and hit an F5. The sun will hit an F5, and the clouds we're going to move, so we'll skip those. Mountains, F5, and the buildings, F5, the trees, F5. Skip the boy for now. Trees, 1, F5, and our mask, F5. There we go. So those are all marked. Let's go ahead and get our boy to walk across the stage. So we'll go back to frame 1, and in frame 1, I'm going to go ahead and drag him off of the stage. So will be off the stage right here. And then I'm going to click the very last frame and I'm going to create a keyframe. So I'm going to go F6, and now I am going to drag him all the way across to where he will just be off the frame on this side. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click in the middle, and in this case I'm going to create a classic tween. So this is basically going to move him across, and it's going to fill in all the space in between. So as I click on that, let's go back and bring him back. In the meantime, I just realized we still have onion skin on, so let's shut the onion skin off. And let's go ahead and see what it looks like with him walking across the stage. I'll hit the return key. It's moving kind of slow. So we may not want to watch it that slow. If we want to see it in more real time, we'll go ahead and drag this back to the beginning. Let's go ahead up to Control, Test Movie, Test. And now this is going to create a test. So there he is walking across. So that actually works pretty good. So let's stop that. Let's go ahead and animate our clouds now. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Clouds. And we're going to do the same thing. Only this time I'm on frame 1. I want my clouds. Let's go ahead and, we got to unlock the clouds first. Unlock. Go ahead and lock the boy. And I'm going to move this set of clouds where they'll be coming in from over the sun. This set of clouds I'm going to move over a little bit more. And they're actually going to move apart from each other as they go. There is frame 1. Let's go to frame 90. And we're going to create a keyframe, F6. And now this cloud, we're probably going to move maybe about that far. They're not going to move far. They're slow moving clouds. And this cloud I'm going to have move maybe right over to about there. And let's go ahead and create classic tween in that frame. And now let's take a look at our whole movie. We're going to go ahead and lock the clouds, and we're going to mask, turn the mask back. And now we're going to go ahead and go to Control, Test Movie, Test. And here's our movie. And it will loop if we choose to let it loop. We only want to see it once. We can go up here under Control and shut the loop off, so it'll only go once. And that is our movie. Okay. That is basic animation using Flash Professional CS5. Your assignment, for one, is to go step by step with these directions with this exact item. And we will have a second assignment where you are going to be creating your own sprite, or if you have a sprite that already has arms and legs, you're going to use your own sprite, create your own background, and create your own animation. So the second one will be up to you, of your choice. I just want to make sure that I do see a lot of things that we've already learned. I'd like to see gradient images. I'd like to see a lot of symbols and a lot of instances. In fact, every item you bring out to the stage should be an instance. I really don't want to see any live drawing going on that will slow your animation down. So that's the assignment. Have fun with that, and we'll pick up on the more advanced animation techniques in the next episode. Thanks.